The evening air had turned sharp with the promise of rain, as the sun disappeared behind the concrete pillars of Highway 17. Ray Wilson pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders and glanced up at the darkening sky. He'd been living under this overpass for nearly 8 months now, long enough to know exactly which spot stayed driest when the storms came. At 62, Ray's body carried the weight of his years. His hands, once steady enough to repair helicopter engines in Vietnam, now trembled slightly as he arranged his few possessions against the concrete wall. A backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a tattered sleeping bag that smelled of mildew no matter how many times he aired it out, a plastic container holding his important papers, his veteran's ID, his social security card, and a worn photograph of his late wife, Helen. He ran a weathered thumb across Helen's face before tucking the photo safely away. "Gonna be a wet one tonight, honey," he whispered, a ritual that kept him feeling human when the world seemed determined to forget he existed. Most days Ray made himself invisible. He'd learned quickly that people preferred not to acknowledge the man living under the bridge. They'd avert their eyes as they drove past, windows rolled up tight against the possibility of being asked for anything. Ray understood. Before his world had collapsed under the weight of Helen's medical bills, he might have done the same. Today had been different, though. He'd managed to collect $8, $5 from helping Mrs. Chen stack boxes behind her small grocery store, and $3 from returning bottles and cans he'd collected throughout the week. $8 meant a hot meal at Denny's, where the night manager would sometimes let him sit in a back booth until closing time if the restaurant wasn't busy. The thought of hot coffee and pancakes made his stomach growl. Ray patted his pocket where the folded bills sat like a promise. He'd wait until the rain passed, then make his way to the diner. It was Tuesday, which meant Lucy would be working. She always slipped him extra bacon when her boss wasn't looking. The first heavy drops began to fall, pinging against the metal guardrails above. Ray tucked himself deeper into his sheltered corner, watching as the traffic thinned out. Most people were home by now, settling in for the evening with their families, their televisions, their lives that included solid walls and roofs that didn't leak. A flash of lightning illuminated the road below, and that's when Ray noticed the motorcycle pulled over on the shoulder about 50 yards from the overpass. The rider was bent over the gas tank, his helmet gleaming wetly in the fading light. Something about the man's posture spoke of trouble. Ray watched as the biker stood up and pulled his phone from his pocket. Even from this distance, Ray could see the frustration in his movements as he punched at the screen. The rider put the phone to his ear, waited, then gestured angrily before trying again. 3 more calls followed, each seemingly more desperate than the last. The rain was coming down harder now, sheeting across the pavement. The biker looked up at the sky, shoulders slumped in defeat. He checked his pockets again, turned them inside out, then leaned against his motorcycle, head bowed. Most people would say Ray had nothing to give. Most people would be wrong. He gathered his tarp around his shoulders like a cape and made his way carefully down the sloped embankment. His old army boots, donated by the Veterans Center last winter, slipped on the wet grass, but he kept his footing. By the time he reached the shoulder of the road, he was soaked through. The biker looked up, startled by Ray's approach. He was younger than Ray had thought, probably in his mid-30s with a neatly trimmed beard and worried eyes. The patch on his leather jacket read Steel Brothers MC above an emblem of a winged wheel. "You okay there?" Ray called over the sound of the rain. The man shook his head. "Out of gas."
"And I just realized I lost my wallet somewhere."
"Must have fallen out at my last stop." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "I've been trying to call my buddies, but everyone's either working or not picking up." Ray nodded, understanding all too well how quickly a normal day could turn into a crisis. "Where you headed?" "Home. My daughter's sick and my wife just called. The fever's getting worse and she wants me there." The man looked at his watch. "I'm Tom, by the way." "Ray," he replied, offering his hand. Tom took it without hesitation, which surprised Ray. Most people looked at his dirt-ingrained nails and found reasons not to touch him. "How far you got to go?" Ray asked. "About 20 miles. Normally wouldn't be a problem, but..." Tom gestured at the gas gauge, its needle pointing firmly at empty. Ray felt the $8 in his pocket. $8 that meant hot food, a dry place to sit, a small moment of dignity in a life that offered few such comforts. He thought about Tom's sick daughter, waiting for her father to come home. He thought about Helen, and how she'd had no one but him during her final months. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. "I got $8, Ray said, pulling the crumpled bills from his pocket. "Gas station's just up the next exit. Might be enough to get you home." Tom stared at the money, then at Ray, taking in his soaked clothes, his unshaven face, the dirt under his fingernails. Understanding dawned in his eyes as he glanced up at the overpass. "I can't take that from you," he said quietly. Ray pushed the money into Tom's hand. "Sure you can. Your little girl needs you more than I need pancakes tonight." For a moment, Tom didn't move. Then he gripped Ray's shoulder, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears or just the rain. "Let me give you my number." "I'll pay you back," Tom said, reaching for his phone. Ray shook his head. "Don't worry about it. Just go take care of your daughter." Tom looked down at the money in his hand, then back at Ray. "Where can I find you? To pay you back?" Ray almost laughed. In 8 months, not a single person had asked where to find him. People worked hard at not finding him, at pretending men like him were simply part of the urban landscape, no more worthy of notice than a street sign or a trash can. He pointed up at the overpass. "I'm around. Under the bridge most nights," Tom nodded slowly. "I'll be back, Ray, I promise." Ray waved him off with a smile he didn't quite feel. He'd heard promises before. They were easy to make and easier to break, especially to someone like him. "Get going before this rain gets worse." He watched as Tom pushed his motorcycle toward the exit ramp that would lead to the gas station. The younger man looked back once, raising his hand in farewell or thanks. Ray couldn't tell which. Then he disappeared around the bend, leaving Ray alone in the rain. The walk back up the embankment was harder than the way down. Ray's knees protested each step, and without the $8 to look forward to, the cold seemed to seep deeper into his bones. By the time he reached his spot under the bridge, his stomach was reminding him loudly that he hadn't eaten since the half sandwich he'd gotten from the church outreach van at lunch. Ray settled back against the wall, wrapping his damp sleeping bag around his shoulders. The tarp had kept his backpack mostly dry, and he rummaged through it for anything he might have forgotten. His fingers closed around a squashed granola bar, one he'd been saving for an emergency. He supposed this qualified. As he chewed the stale oats and dried fruit, Ray thought about Tom and his daughter. He hoped the $8 would be enough to get the man home. He hoped the little girl's fever would break. He hoped, as he always did, that his small act of kindness might matter in some way, even if just for tonight. The rain continued to fall, drumming against the concrete above him like distant applause. Ray pulled his cap lower over his eyes and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in his stomach. He'd gone hungry before. He would again. That was just life on the streets. Still, as he drifted toward an uneasy sleep, Ray found himself wondering if Tom would really come back. In his experience, people rarely returned to places that made them uncomfortable, and few things made people more uncomfortable than being confronted with their own good fortune in the face of another's misfortune. The highway hummed with the sound of passing cars, each one carrying someone toward home, toward warmth, toward a life where $8 was a movie ticket or a fast food meal or a forgotten bill in a coat pocket, not a day's wages, not dinner, not a sacrifice. Ray didn't regret giving Tom the money. If his years on the street had taught him anything, it was that generosity was sometimes all you had left to give. When you couldn't offer security or stability or success, the things the world valued, you could still offer kindness. And kindness, Ray believed, was never wasted, even if it was never returned. As sleep finally claimed him, Ray's last thoughts were not of his empty stomach or his damp clothes or the long night ahead. Instead, he thought of a father making it home to his sick child, thanks to $8 that had briefly belonged to a man that most of the world had forgotten. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough. 2 days had passed since Ray had given his last $8 to the stranded biker. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the blue sky and scattered clouds. Ray sat on a concrete barrier near his spot under the bridge, letting the mid-morning sun warm his aching joints. His stomach had settled into a dull, familiar ache, the kind that came with missing too many meals. He'd managed to get by on the kindness of a church volunteer who'd handed out sandwiches yesterday afternoon, but today's prospects looked slim. Wednesday was always tough. The food pantry was closed and the community kitchen across town only served dinner on Wednesdays. too far for Ray's arthritic knees to manage the walk there and back before dark. Still, the sunshine felt good on his face, and Ray had learned to appreciate small comforts. He closed his eyes and tilted his chin up, soaking in the warmth like a plant turning toward light. In moments like this, he could almost forget the hard ground he slept on, the suspicious glances from passers-by, the constant worry about where his next meal would come from. A familiar rumble broke through his thoughts. A motorcycle. Ray opened his eyes just as a black Harley pulled onto the shoulder below the overpass. The rider cut the engine and removed his helmet, revealing a face Ray recognized immediately. Tom. Ray watched, stunned, as the younger man grabbed a paper bag from his saddlebag and made his way up the embankment. He hadn't really expected to see Tom again. People made promises all the time, especially to folks like him, but following through was another matter entirely. "Thought I might find you here," Tom called out, a grin spreading across his face as he approached. "Been looking for you since yesterday." Ray stood up, brushing dust from his pants out of habit more than any real hope of looking presentable. "Your daughter okay?" he asked, because that seemed more important than anything else. Tom's smile softened. "She's good. Fever broke that night. Doctor says it was just a nasty virus." He held out the paper bag. "I brought you something. Figured you might be hungry." The smell wafting from the bag made Ray's mouth water instantly. Eggs, bacon, coffee. His stomach growled loudly enough for both men to hear, and Tom chuckled. "Sounds like I was right," he said, setting the bag down on the concrete barrier. "Breakfast from Millie's Diner. Best in town, according to my wife." Ray hesitated, pride warring with hunger. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Tom's voice turned serious. "You gave me your last dollars when I needed help. I don't forget something like that." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is yours too." Ray accepted the bag first, the warm weight of it like a gift beyond measure. He peered inside to find a foam container and a large coffee cup with a plastic lid. Then reluctantly he took the envelope. It felt thick between his fingers. "What's this?" he asked, though he had a pretty good idea. $200, Tom said simply. "Would have been here sooner, but had to wait till payday." Ray nearly dropped the envelope. "$200? That's way too much. I only gave you $8. Tom shook his head. "It's not about the amount. It's about what it meant." He looked around at Ray's makeshift home under the bridge, taking in the carefully arranged sleeping bag, the small pile of possessions. "You gave me everything you had that night so I could get home to my little girl. How do you put a price on that?" Ray didn't know what to say. He'd gone so long without anyone acknowledging him, let alone repaying a kindness, that he felt off balance, suspicious even. Life had taught him that unexpected windfalls usually came with strings attached. "What's the catch?" he asked finally. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "No catch. Just paying a debt." He paused, then added, "Though I would like to hear your story if you're willing to share it. Not many men would do what you did, especially not in your situation." Ray looked down at the breakfast in his hands, then at the envelope. The money could keep him fed for weeks. Could maybe even get him a cheap motel room for a few nights, a real shower, a real bed. The thought was almost too much to hope for. "Not much to tell," he said, settling back down on the concrete barrier. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the food container. Steam rose from a generous helping of scrambled eggs, bacon, and hash browns. "Mind if I eat while we talk?" Tom sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "Go right ahead." Ray took a bite of the eggs, closing his eyes briefly at the rich taste. Real butter, pepper, maybe even a little cheese. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten something so good. Between careful bites, pacing himself to avoid getting sick after so long without a proper meal, Ray told his story. About serving as a helicopter mechanic in Vietnam. About coming home and meeting Helen at a diner where she waited tables. About their small, happy life together in a rented house on the edge of town. About Helen's diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, discovered too late to do much more than make her comfortable. Insurance covered some of it, Ray explained, sipping the coffee that had gone from hot to warm as he talked. But not all. Had to take out loans, maxed out credit cards, sold our car. Still wasn't enough. Tom listened quietly, his face grave. He didn't offer empty platitudes or uncomfortable pity, which Ray appreciated. After she passed, I couldn't keep up with the bills. Lost the house. Tried staying with friends for a while, but you know how that goes. People get tired of a sad old man on their couch. Ray shrugged. Ended up here about 8 months ago. Been making do since then. You're a veteran, Tom said. Aren't there programs I've been on waiting lists? Ray cut in. VA's backed up. Caseworker says it could be another year before housing comes through. He finished the last of his breakfast and carefully closed the container. Besides, some days I'm not sure I deserve the help. Plenty of younger vets out there who need it more. Tom frowned. That's not how it works. You served your country. You deserve better than this. Ray didn't answer. He'd had this argument with himself too many times to count, and he was tired of it. Instead, he patted his pocket where he'd put the envelope. This will help, though. I appreciate it. It's not enough, Tom said almost to himself. Then more decisively, listen, I've got to get to work, but I want to come back. Maybe bring you some dinner later? And some supplies? The offer took Ray by surprise. One act of kindness repaid was unexpected enough. The suggestion of ongoing help was almost unthinkable. Why would you do that? He asked. Tom stood, brushing off his jeans. Because we take care of our own. And because it's the right thing to do. He pulled out his phone. Can I take your picture? Just so my wife knows who I'm talking about. She wants to help too. Ray self-consciously ran a hand over his unshaven face. I'm not exactly photogenic these days. You look fine, Tom assured him, raising the phone. Just a quick one, okay? Ray nodded reluctantly, and Tom snapped the photo. Then he held out his hand. I'll be back around 6 if that's okay with you. Ray shook the offered hand, still bewildered by this turn of events. I'll be here, he said, because where else would he go? As Tom made his way back down to his motorcycle, Ray called after him. Hey, Tom? Thank you. Really? Tom waved once before putting his helmet on. Thank me by being here when I get back, he called. Then he started the bike and pulled away, the sound of the engine fading as he merged back onto the highway. Ray sat for a long time after Tom left, the empty food container in his lap, the envelope heavy in his pocket. $200. It wasn't enough to change his life, not really, but it was enough to make the next few weeks easier, enough to restore a little bit of the dignity that homelessness had stripped away. For the first time in months, Ray allowed himself to feel something close to hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained him through Helen's illness, the kind that burned bright and painful and ultimately left ashes in its wake. This was smaller, more cautious, the kind that whispered maybe things could get better. Maybe he wasn't as forgotten as he'd thought. Ray carefully packed away his trash and tucked the coffee cup into his backpack to reuse later. Then he counted out $40 from the envelope, enough for a cheap meal each day for the next week, and hid the rest inside the lining of his sleeping bag where no one would think to look. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ray found himself watching the highway more closely than usual, tracking each motorcycle that passed with new interest. 6 o'clock suddenly seemed very far away. And yet for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ray had something to look forward to. True to his word, Tom returned that evening with a backpack full of supplies and a box of hot pizza. They sat together under the bridge, sharing the food as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tom had brought not just food but also a new sleeping bag, socks, a warm hoodie, and a prepaid phone with his number already programmed in. Just in case you need anything, Tom had explained, showing Ray how to use it, or if you move spots. This way we can stay in touch. Ray had been overwhelmed, unsure how to accept such generosity, but Tom had a way of making it feel natural, like they were just two friends helping each other out. For 3 days, this became their routine. Tom would stop by in the morning on his way to work at the auto shop he owned, bringing coffee and breakfast. Then he'd return in the evening with dinner and news from the outside world. They'd talk about Tom's daughter Lily, who was now fully recovered from her virus. About his wife Diane, who had started packing extra sandwiches for Ray. About the motorcycle club, the Steele brothers that Tom had been part of for nearly a decade. On the 4th day, Ray woke to the sound of heavy rain. He stayed tucked in his new sleeping bag, which kept him warmer and drier than he'd been in months. The prepaid phone showed it was just past 7 in the morning. Usually Tom would be arriving soon with coffee, but Ray doubted he'd come in this downpour. The phone buzzed, in his hand, startling him. A text message from Tom. Too wet for the bike today. Taking the truck. Still want breakfast? Ray's fingers felt clumsy on the small buttons, but he managed to reply. Don't go out of your way. The response came quickly. No trouble. Be there in 20. True to his word, Tom's pickup truck pulled up below the overpass 20 minutes later. Ray watched as Tom jogged up the embankment. A plastic bag in one hand and a carrier with 2 coffee cups in the other, rain dripping from the hood of his jacket. "Thought we might eat in the truck," Tom said when he reached Ray's spot. "It's dry in there and I got the heater running." The idea of sitting in a warm, dry vehicle was too tempting to resist. Ray gathered his few important possessions. He'd learned never to leave anything valuable unattended, and followed Tom down to the pickup. The blast of warm air when he opened the passenger door felt like a luxury. They ate egg sandwiches and drank coffee as rain drummed on the roof of the truck. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, clearing rivulets of water. For a brief moment, Ray could almost pretend this was normal, that he was just a regular guy having breakfast with a friend before heading to work or home or anywhere that wasn't under a bridge. "Ray," Tom said after they'd finished eating, his tone more serious than usual. "I've been thinking." Something in his voice made Ray tense up. This was it, the moment when Tom would say he couldn't keep coming by. When the brief connection Ray had allowed himself to enjoy would end, just like everything else good in his life. "The guys at the club," Tom continued. "I told them about you, about what you did for me that night." Ray shifted uncomfortably. "Didn't do it for recognition." "I know that," Tom said quickly. "That's part of what makes it special. But they wanted to hear the story, so I told them. And they were impressed. Really impressed." Ray didn't know what to say to that, so he sipped his coffee and waited for whatever was coming next. "Anyway, they want to meet you," Tom said. "They've been talking about ways we might be able to help. As a club." Ray stared out at the rain-slick highway. "Don't need charity," he said quietly. "It's not charity," Tom insisted. "It's brotherhood. That's what the club is about, having each other's backs. And the way I see it, you're already showing those values. You had my back when I needed it." Ray turned to look at Tom, trying to gauge his sincerity. He'd met too many people with good intentions that faded as soon as helping got inconvenient. "What exactly did you have in mind?" he asked cautiously. Tom smiled, seeming relieved that Ray was at least willing to listen. "Well, for starters, we've got a club member who owns a small apartment building. Nothing fancy, but he's got a studio unit opening up next week. He's willing to let you have it. First 3 months free while you get back on your feet." Ray's breath caught in his throat. An apartment. A real place with walls and a roof and a door that locked. It seemed too good to be true. "And I could use some help at the shop," Tom continued. "Nothing too physical, I know your knees give you trouble. But answering phones, helping with paperwork, keeping the waiting area tidy. It's not full-time, but it's something. Enough to cover the rent after those first 3 months." The rain seemed to fade into the background as Ray tried to process what Tom was offering. Not just a handout, but a way forward. A chance to reclaim some of the dignity he'd lost. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why would you all do this for a stranger?" Tom turned in his seat to face Ray fully. "Because $8. Ray blinked, confused. "What, $8? Tom repeated. "That's what you gave me that night. Your last $8. To a stranger when you had nothing else to give." He shook his head, as if still amazed by the memory. "Do you know how rare that kind of generosity is? Most people with plenty won't give $1 to someone in need. But you gave everything." He reached over and gripped Ray's shoulder. "The club votes on who we help and how. It was unanimous, Ray. Everyone wants to be part of this. But there's one condition." Ray tensed again. Here it was. "The catch. You've got to let us take you to the VA tomorrow," Tom said. "Get you registered for all the benefits you're entitled to. No more waiting lists. Pete's brother works there. He can fast-track your paperwork. You earned those benefits, Ray. It's time you used them." For a long moment, Ray couldn't speak. The kindness being shown to him was too big, too overwhelming. He'd spent so long expecting nothing that the prospect of so much help at once made him dizzy. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed. Tom squeezed his shoulder once more before letting go. "Say yes. Come meet the guys tonight. Let us help you the way you helped me." Rain continued to pour outside, but inside the truck, something warm bloomed in Ray's chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Okay," he said. "Yes?" Tom's face broke into a wide grin. "Great, I'll pick you up around 7. The club's having a meeting at our headquarters. It's just a converted warehouse. Nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm." As they sat together in the idling truck, Ray found himself wondering what Helen would think of all this. She'd always believed that kindness came back to you eventually. He'd stopped believing that after losing her, after losing everything. But now, watching the rain wash the world clean outside, he wondered if she might have been right after all. "There's something else," Tom said, breaking into Ray's thoughts. "I took that picture of you the other day, remember? Well, I posted it on our club's private page along with your story, just so the guys would know who they were helping." Ray nodded, not seeing the issue. "The thing is," Tom continued, "one of our members, Bill, he recognized you. Said he served with a Ray Wilson in Vietnam, helicopter mechanic with the 101st Airborne. That you?" Ray felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Bill?" he repeated. "Bill Travers?" Tom's eyes widened. "Yeah, that's him. You know him? Know him?" Bill Travers had pulled Ray from a burning helicopter after a crash landing near Cam Bay. They'd served together for 18 months, had shared sea rations and cigarettes and stories about girls back home, had promised to look each other up after the war but somehow never had. "We were friends," Ray said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "A lifetime ago." Tom pulled out his phone. "He's coming tonight. Wanted me to make sure it was really you first." He typed quickly, then turned the screen so Ray could see. A message to Bill. "It's him." The response came almost immediately. "Tell that old son of a gun I'm bringing the bourbon. For the first time in years." Ray laughed, really laughed, until tears came to his eyes. Tom joined in, neither of them caring about the curious glances from drivers passing by, seeing two men in a pickup truck laughing in the pouring rain. Sometimes, Ray thought as he wiped his eyes, $8 could buy a lot more than just gas. Sometimes it could buy your way back to the world you'd lost. By 7 o'clock that evening, the rain had settled into a gentle drizzle. Ray had spent the afternoon at the public library, using their bathroom to clean up as best he could. He'd washed his face and hands, combed his hair, and changed into the cleanest clothes he had. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do. He wanted to look presentable when he met Tom's friends. When Tom's pickup pulled up under the bridge, Ray was waiting, his few possessions packed away. He'd been half afraid that Tom wouldn't show, that all the promises had been empty words, but the headlights cutting through the dusk proved him wrong. "Ready to meet the guys?" Tom asked as Ray climbed into the passenger seat. Ray nodded, though his stomach was tied in knots. "As ready as I'll ever be." The Steel Brothers clubhouse turned out to be an old warehouse on the edge of town. The building had been painted black with the club's logo, a winged wheel surrounded by flames displayed prominently above the entrance. A row of motorcycles gleamed under the outdoor lights, and the sound of music and laughter spilled from inside. Ray hesitated at the entrance. "There are a lot of people in there." Tom put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Just the club members and some of their families. They're good people, Ray. They're excited to meet you." Taking a deep breath, Ray followed Tom inside. The interior of the warehouse had been transformed into a comfortable gathering space. One side held a bar and seating area with mismatched couches and chairs. The other had tables and a small kitchen. The walls were decorated with motorcycle memorabilia, American flags, and framed photographs of club members. The noise level dropped as they entered, conversations pausing as all eyes turned toward them. Ray fought the urge to turn around and leave. He hadn't been in a room with this many people in years, and the attention made him want to disappear. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard stepped forward. He wore a leather vest with the Steel Brothers patch over a plain black t-shirt. "You must be Ray," he said, holding out a massive hand. "I'm Doug, club president." Ray shook the offered hand, surprised by the firm but respectful grip. "Nice to meet you, sir," Doug laughed. "No sir needed here. We're all just brothers." He turned to address the room. "Everyone, this is Ray Wilson, the man who helped Tom when he was stranded," even though Ray didn't have anything to spare. A chorus of greetings filled the room, and Ray felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. He hadn't done anything special, just what any decent person would do. But before he could say anything, the crowd parted, and an older man with a slight limp made his way forward. Ray felt the air leave his lungs. Despite the decades that had passed, he would have recognized Bill Travers anywhere. The same sharp blue eyes, though now surrounded by wrinkles. The same crooked smile that had kept spirits up during the worst days of their tour. "Hey, Wrench," Bill said, using Ray's old nickname from their service days. "Been a long time." For a moment, Ray couldn't speak. Then he found himself moving forward, and the two men embraced like the brothers they had once been. Ray felt tears threatening and didn't try to hold them back. Some things were worth crying over. Thought you were dead? Bill said when they finally separated, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Tried to find you after Helen passed. Heard about the medical bills, wanted to help, but you disappeared. Didn't want to be found, Ray admitted. Wasn't much left of me back then. Bill gripped his shoulder. Well, I found you now, old friend. And this time I'm not letting you disappear again. What followed was one of the most surreal evenings of Ray's life. The club members treated him like an honored guest, bringing him food and drinks, introducing themselves and their families. Tom's wife, Diane, was there with their daughter, Lily, who solemnly thanked Ray for helping her daddy get home when she was sick. Bill stuck to Ray's side, catching him up on the past 40 years, his own marriage, his kids now grown, his job as a mechanic with the Steele brothers long before retirement. They reminisced about their time in Vietnam, sharing stories that had the younger club members listening in fascination. Never knew you were such a war hero. Bill, one of them commented. Bill shook his head. No heroes, just survivors. Except maybe this guy. He nudged Ray. Pulled 3 men from a burning chopper before the ammo started cooking off. Got the Silver Star for it, though he never wears it. Ray shifted uncomfortably. Long time ago. Different life. Same man, though. Bill insisted. Same guy who'd give his last $8 to a stranger. That's who you've always been, Ray. As the evening progressed, Doug called for everyone's attention. The room quieted as he stood in the center, Ray and Tom beside him. The Steele brothers have a tradition, Doug explained. When one of us finds someone who embodies the values we stand for, loyalty, sacrifice, brotherhood, we don't let them walk away. We've taken a vote, and it was unanimous. He turned to Ray. We'd like to help you get back on your feet. Not charity, we don't do charity. But we take care of our own. Doug outlined the plan. The apartment Tom had mentioned, ready for Ray to move in immediately. The part-time job at Tom's auto shop. Help with navigating the VA benefits Ray was entitled to. Furniture, clothing, food. Everything he would need to restart his life. All we ask in return, Doug finished, is that when you're back on solid ground, you find a way to help someone else. Keep the chain going. Ray looked around the room at all these strangers who were offering to change his life because of one small act of kindness. His gaze landed on Tom, who gave him an encouraging nod. I don't know what to say, Ray admitted. Say yes, Bill urged. Let us help you, brother. Ray took a deep breath. Yes, thank you. A cheer went up from the crowd, and Ray found himself surrounded by people clapping him on the back, shaking his hand, welcoming him to what they kept calling their extended family. Later, as the party continued around them, Bill pulled Ray aside. They sat in a quiet corner, 2 old soldiers sharing a drink and a moment of peace. Tomorrow's going to be busy, Bill said. Pete's brother at the VA is ready for us first thing in the morning. Then we move your stuff to the apartment. Diane's already got it stocked with groceries. It's too much, Ray said, still overwhelmed by it all. Bill shook his head. It's not enough. Not after all these years you've been struggling alone. He took a sip of his drink. I've got a spare room at my place, too. If the apartment doesn't work out, or if you just want company sometimes, my wife makes a mean pot roast on Sundays. Ray felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of loneliness and grief that had been pulled tight for so long he'd stopped noticing it. I'd like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, then Bill said, You know what gets me? If Tom's bike hadn't run out of gas on that exact stretch of road, if you hadn't been under that particular bridge, if you hadn't decided to help him, he shook his head in wonder. All these years I've been looking for you, and it took $8 to bring you back. Ray thought about the strange paths life took, how a single decision, to help or not help, to reach out or turn away, could change everything that came after. Helen always said there were no accidents, Ray mused. She believed everything happened for a reason, even the bad stuff. Bill raised his glass. To Helen, then. Smart woman. To Helen, Ray agreed, touching his glass to Bill's. Across the room, Tom was watching them, a satisfied smile on his face. When he caught Ray's eye, he raised his own glass in a silent toast. Ray nodded back, a gesture of thanks that felt wholly inadequate for the gift he'd been given. Not just shelter and work, but a connection to the world again. A reason to keep going. As the evening wound down, Ray found himself standing outside the clubhouse, breathing in the cool night air. The rain had stopped, and stars were appearing between breaks in the clouds. For the first time in years, he looked up at them and felt something other than indifference. Something like wonder. Something like hope. Tomorrow he would begin the long process of rebuilding his life. It wouldn't be easy. There would be paperwork and appointments, adjustments and setbacks. But he wouldn't be doing it alone. Not anymore. All because of $8 and a choice to help a stranger on a rainy night. All because he had reached out instead of turning away. 3 months had passed since that rainy night when Ray first met the Steele brothers. The studio apartment they'd provided had become a real home, small but comfortable. Pictures hung on the walls, mostly photographs Bill had saved from their army days, plus a few new ones taken with the club members. A coffee maker sat on the kitchen counter, and actual food filled the refrigerator. Ray still found himself pausing sometimes, overcome by the simple miracle of having 4 walls and a roof that belonged to him. The part-time job at Tom's auto shop had worked out better than expected. Ray's experience as a helicopter mechanic translated well to cars, and his meticulous attention to detail made him an asset in the shop. Though his knees wouldn't allow him to work under vehicles, he'd proven himself valuable managing the front desk, organizing the parts inventory, and even diagnosing problems just by listening to engines. Tom had increased his hours twice already. On this particular Sunday morning, Ray was getting ready for what had become a weekly tradition: dinner at Bill and Nancy's house. Nancy's pot roast had indeed been as good as advertised, and the elderly couple had essentially adopted Ray into their family. Their grown children and grandchildren often joined for Sunday dinner, and Ray had slowly gotten used to the noise and chaos of family gatherings again. Ray checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him had changed significantly in 3 months. His hair was neatly trimmed, his beard shaped and clean rather than wild. His cheeks had filled out from regular meals, and the haunted look had faded from his eyes. He still carried the memory of those months under the bridge. He suspected he always would, but it no longer defined him. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ray wasn't expecting anyone this early. Sunday mornings were usually quiet, with most of the club members sleeping in after Saturday night gatherings. He opened the door to find Tom standing there, looking unusually serious. "Everything okay?" Ray asked, immediately concerned. Tom nodded. "Yeah, just need you to come with me to the clubhouse. Something important's happening." "Now?" "I was heading to Bill's later for dinner." "This won't take long," Tom assured him. "You can still make dinner, but you really need to see this." Curious and slightly concerned, Ray grabbed his jacket and followed Tom down to his truck. The spring morning was bright and clear, birds singing in the trees that lined the street. As they drove, Tom was uncharacteristically quiet, checking his phone at stoplights and typing quick responses. "You sure everything's okay?" Ray asked again. Tom glanced over with a half smile. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. You'll see." When they pulled up to the clubhouse, Ray was surprised to see the parking lot full of motorcycles, far more than the club's usual membership would account for. License plates from neighboring states were visible, and bikes of every make and model gleamed in the morning sun. "What's going on?" Ray asked, a hint of anxiety creeping into his voice. Large crowds still made him uncomfortable sometimes, a lingering effect from his months of isolation. "Come on," Tom said, leading the way to the entrance. "Doug wants to talk to you." Inside, the clubhouse was packed with people. Ray recognized the Steele brothers members, but there were dozens of unfamiliar faces as well, all wearing leather vests with different club patches. The crowd parted as Tom led Ray toward the center of the room, where Doug stood on a small platform. "There he is," Doug called out when he spotted Ray. "The man of the hour." All eyes turned to Ray, and he fought the urge to back away. Tom's hand on his shoulder kept him grounded. "Ray, I want you to meet some people," Doug said, gesturing to the gathered crowd. "We've got members here from 17 different motorcycle clubs across 3 states. They all came to meet you." Ray looked around in confusion. "Me, why?" A woman stepped forward. She wore a leather vest with a patch reading Road Angels MC, and had kind eyes and a no-nonsense face. "Because we heard your story," she said, "about how you gave your last $8 to help Tom when you had nothing yourself. Tom posted about it on our club's social media," Doug explained. "It went viral in the biker community. These folks have been asking to meet you for weeks." Ray shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." A murmur of disagreement ran through the crowd. "Not anyone." said a tall man with a gray beard and a vest identifying him as president of the Thunder Riders. Most people with homes and full bank accounts won't stop to help a stranger. You had every reason not to help and you did anyway. Doug held up his hands for quiet. The thing is, Ray, when we heard your story, we all wanted to help. Each club took up collections from their members. At first, we were just going to get you set up with the basics, the apartment, some clothes, food. But then more clubs got involved and, well, he gestured to a folding table that had been set up nearby. We've got something to show you. Tom guided Ray to the table where a large envelope sat beside a set of keys and a folder full of papers. Ray looked questioningly at Doug. Open the envelope first, Doug encouraged. With trembling fingers, Ray picked it up and broke the seal. Inside was a bank statement with his name on it. The balance showed $15,783.42. What is this? Ray asked, his voice barely audible. Every club contributed what they could, Doug explained. Individual members, too. It just kept growing. That's your nest egg, Ray. For emergencies, for retirement, for whatever you need. Ray stared at the number, unable to process it. After months of having nothing, the amount seemed impossible. And these, Doug continued, pushing the keys forward, are for your new truck. Nothing fancy, just a reliable used Ford that Pete found and the guys at the shop fixed up. You'll need your own transportation now that you're working more hours. The folder contained papers for health insurance, auto insurance, and a certification program at the local community college for automotive repair, all paid in full. We figured you might want to get officially certified, Tom explained. Classes are evenings, so you can still work during the day. Ray looked around at all these strangers who had come together to change his life. I don't know what to say, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Don't say anything, Doug replied with a smile. Just keep doing what you're doing. Working hard, showing up, being the kind of man who would give his last $8 to help someone in need. The crowd broke into applause and Ray felt tears threatening. He'd cried more in the past 3 months than in the previous 10 years combined. But these were different tears. These were healing. As the formal presentation ended, people began approaching Ray individually. Each had a story to share, about times they'd been helped by strangers or times they'd helped others. The woman from the Road Angels, whose name was Linda, told Ray about a homeless shelter her club supported. The Thunder Riders president, Jack, described their annual toy run for children in foster care. That's the thing about kindness, Bill said, appearing at Ray's side with a cup of coffee for him. It spreads, like ripples in a pond. Throughout the morning, Ray met dozens of bikers from all walks of life. Teachers, nurses, construction workers, business owners, all united by their love of the open road and their commitment to taking care of their own. By noon, he had collected phone numbers, invitations to club events, and promises of friendship that stretched across state lines. As the gathering began to wind down, Ray found a quiet moment with Tom. I still don't understand, Ray admitted. All this? He gestured around the room. For one small thing I did. Tom shook his head. It wasn't small, Ray. Not to me, not to Lily. That night, when I made it home with the gas your money bought, her fever was spiking. Diane was getting ready to call an ambulance. Being there, being able to help get her to the doctor right away, that mattered. He put a hand on Ray's shoulder. But it's more than that. Your story reminded all these people of something important. That generosity isn't about what you have, it's about what you're willing to give. You gave everything. As people began to leave, each stopped to shake Ray's hand or give him a hug. Many pressed business cards into his palm, telling him to call if he ever needed anything. By the time the last motorcycle rumbled out of the parking lot, Ray felt dazed by the outpouring of support. Doug, Bill, and Tom stood with him in the suddenly quiet clubhouse. So, Bill said with a grin, still coming to dinner? Nancy's made apple pie for dessert. Ray laughed, the sound coming easier these days. Wouldn't miss it. As they walked out to the parking lot, Ray paused to look at his new truck. A well-maintained older model Ford with a Steel Brothers sticker in the back window. Another symbol of his changed life, you know, Doug said, following his gaze. In 3 months, you've gone from having nothing to having a home, a job, a truck, savings, health insurance, and more friends than you can count. He clapped Ray on the back. Not bad for an investment of $8. Ray thought about that rainy night under the bridge, about the simple choice to help a stranger in need. He couldn't have imagined then where that choice would lead, to friendship, To community, to a second chance at life. Best $8 I ever spent, he said softly, as he drove his new truck to Bill and Nancy's house that afternoon. Following Tom's pickup through familiar streets, Ray thought about all the people he'd met that day. 17 motorcycle clubs, more than 300 bikers who had lined up to help a man they'd never met, all because of one small act of kindness. The next time he passed the overpass where he'd lived for those long months, Ray didn't look away as he had in the past. Instead, he slowed down, remembering, not with shame or sadness, but with understanding. That bridge had been part of his journey, not the end of it. And the man who had given away his last $8 still existed inside him. A man who knew that sometimes the smallest choices could create the biggest changes. A man who would never forget what it meant to need help or what it meant to give it.